discussion of where we're going. So I've been very fortunate to have worked in a number of universities and with a number of companies. And in each place I go, I become a kind of new person. So when I was at IIT, when I left New York, I started to fully understand the business of design because of the Vogel group and the focus in IIT. And they're still focused today in their master's and PhD program. So it's very nice when you're teaching and learning at the same time. I left Chicago and went to Carnegie Mellon. And as many of you know now, Carnegie Mellon is considered almost as powerful as Boston with MIT and San Francisco with Stanford. But when I was there, it was that powerful, just not recognized. So I was able to see the evolution of the new technologies and the new economy as the researchers and the kind of interaction with technology and corporations that Carnegie Mellon has been able to do for decades. And I was able to then work with my colleague, Professor John Kagan, and to work in integrated product development and work with several companies and just learn so much, and also to start to understand how students can be put into successful teams to create innovation that's unique, different than companies, different than consulting firms, because of their unique moment in their lives. And so I learned how to do that, and then that got me to Cincinnati, where I was able to work with the University of Cincinnati, where I still am, and also to bring me connected to Procter & Gamble, and then eventually, more recently, with Children's Hospital. So I've been very, very fortunate to be in moments where curriculum and programs are evolving and where I'm able to leverage a university and the context of the university in a city. Okay, never mind. So one of the things that I started to realize is there are two major forces at work in terms of materials. There are materials that are being produced by companies that have particular capabilities, and then they compete with other kinds of companies around market segments, market opportunities. And then the forces that are working in society are constantly changed. So these two kind of forces work constantly to make materials and processes better, sometimes by the companies pushing new insights from the inside out, but very often by individuals, consumers, and companies demanding more of materials. So one of the interesting books that came out while I was at Carnegie Mellon was this book called Crossing the Chasm. And when it came out in 2006, most companies were producing products with a life cycle that was long enough that you could maintain a penetration from the early adopters through to the early majority and late majority. And so this could be a year, 2 years, 5 years. And so that was a very good thing. Once you learned how to cross the chasm that the book talked about from the early adopters into the early majority then would then inform the late majority. And of course you have the laggards, which very often do not actually participate, and they can be out of full cycle. So this has been a fairly healthy evolution over the 20th century into the early 21st century, but now things have changed. And so I was asked what's changed since I wrote the book, and one of the things that's changed is this. This is a cycle that's lasted for maybe 30 years, but now the cycle looks like this. What we're starting to see is compressed cycle times, where products and services come out and then constantly change, and change quickly. So now, what you have is a new dimension. And so you have rapidly changing product cycles that never gets to the late majority, that never even touches the laggards. And so we're starting to leave more and more people out of the accelerated pace of change, which is a very interesting challenge. So I'm very interested in how, as designers, we can help deal with this. So this is happening in several categories, but certainly in high technology and computer-related and computer software-driven company service. So you see this in everything, this constant push to be the next, the best, the greatest, whether it's in governments, whether it's certainly the military has been there for years, and then slowly that would come out into mainstream, but now that's happening faster and faster. And this constant push to do more faster and to use a lean approach to constantly drive change is a challenge, and for manufacturers of materials, the pressure is enormous. So, in the Creating Breakthrough product book, when we did the second edition, we talked about service design. I just gave a talk at the Cumulus conference, and as far as I'm concerned, every company today is a service company, and it's just a question of what dimension of analog and digital the company is. But no matter what, we're all driven by this global information system service economy that tends to drive all of our experiences. So this is the diagram from the book, which is still relevant today, and the main difference is this cycle is happening faster and faster. So what tends to happen is either society draws more, expects more, companies want to compete and change faster, or the economics change that require opportunities of companies to respond to, and they all interact. So this is a little example of, in the case of aluminum, which is one of my favorite materials to talk about, in this case, the image on your left is the top of the Washington Monument in the United States. In the 1800s, when that was built, the top of it is aluminum, because at the time that this was built, it was the most expensive material in the world. And the reason was the difficulty of extracting aluminum from alumina needed such a very intense heat process and conversion process that it was very difficult to do with the technology then. So it was looked at as light silver. And this product on the right is something I actually bought in New Orleans, made out of aluminum soda cans in Vietnam, shipped to New Orleans so I could buy it. So if you understand the conversion of the value equation between the most expensive material in the world and a material that's recycled to make a low-end emerging economy product, you realize how materials will morph into different kinds of perception of value over time. So this is one of my favorite designs of all time. And this is the airport seating that many of you now, when you go to an airport, will still see. Charles and Ray Eames decided to use aluminum and plastic, which we now call naugahyde, and was the first to actually create material, furniture seating using this for the home and also for airports. Eero Saarinen, who was a major architect for airports at the time, went to school to Cranbrook with the Eames and asked him to design seating. This seating is a beautiful solution in every way and uses aluminum incredibly well because the furniture is shipped in parts, it's shipped knocked down, easy to assemble. It also is very lightweight, so you can move it. Also, it's open underneath so you can clean under it. The seat itself is ergonomically designed to accommodate a wide range of people, and the material itself, the naugahyde of the seat, is very easy to change, but it never rips. So this does everything a design should do in the context of what an airport seating should do, which is why it's still around in many airports today. But this was, to me, one of the examples of using aluminum in the sense that nobody sees it as aluminum. They see it as a high-end metal because of the finish and the way that the forms are designed. So this is an example of really extending a value proposition of a material that most people at the time would never think should be for airports. So then, of course, you've got the high-performance aspect of aluminum in jet engines and used in Rolls-Royce jet engines. And so here you see the performance value of aluminum. And again, most people have no idea that the blades that they fly with every day, and now there's all sorts of new materials that are used. But the fact that this was seen as not only the weight of aircraft reduced by aluminum for the surface, but actually the jet engines themselves, creating lightweight, powerful engines. And again, aluminum in this case, performing as a high-end material, we've been able to withstand the stress, but also to reduce the weight. So a wonderful, again, kind of new value for aluminum. And then this is an amazing breakthrough in that this was part of a social change. As more and more older people wanted to stay active, the idea of assistive walking became a very powerful force in the 70s. And so the aluminum then was an enabling structure to allow people to use walkers instead of canes and stay mobile, stay active longer, and have a better quality of life. So if you notice, these are all value aspects of aluminum over and above the pure nature of the material itself. And then when Apple, Jonathan Ives, decided to choose aluminum for the Mac system, he again elevated aluminum in a whole new way. And if you notice, this is an elegant, subtle satin finish, not eye polish like the Eames furniture, but really a wonderful new way of using aluminum, differentiating it from all the plastic laptops that were out, and really creating a whole new form language. And again, if you ever hear Jonathan Ives talk about his products, the full understanding and the appreciation for aluminum as a material that can be malleable and treated in different ways gives you a sense of how he sees aluminum as an empowerment tool. So again, with the whole series of iPhones that have come on since, this gives aluminum a very contemporary look and feel. It makes you feel that this material then is competitive with all the other high-performance materials that are coming out. And again, in the latest form. And then the idea that you can then use color as well. And as aluminum manufacturers work with Apple, then Apple pushes them to do things, and they try to make Apple feel better by using aluminum, because they're always going to be competing, as they had to when Apple had to come out with the color series to compete with some of their competitors that went back to plastic. So here's a classic example that I've used, and it's in our book. When I was in Pittsburgh, Alcoa came to us, Jonathan Kagan and myself, and said, what's wrong with aluminum? Why aren't people using it for beverages anymore? Why has it lost its market share? So we did an analysis with them to talk about what are the value attributes of the different packages. So we, in the book, developed a value analysis, and this is one of the, to me, the biggest kinds of breakthrough for the book as a way of thinking, because everybody talks about value, but no one has discrete attributes of value. So in this case, we were talking about how do you differentiate the sub-values of a product or a material. So what we did is we actually compared the value attributes of the different packages. And as it turns out, each package has value, and each package has lesser value. So this is the value for the glass bottle, which, by the way, clearly has the best sense of taste and experience to both hold and drink from. And then the aluminum can made its name by being stackable when people went to warehouse distribution in the 60s and 70s, being environmentally responsible, and also being able to store without any pressure of loss of the carbonation. But with plastic bottles, you got back to the original form of glass and much lightweight, and you were able to use paper instead of the glass to actually promote the product. And so this was also one of the most important things, that plastic is resealable, and you could sell it in larger sizes. As people demanded more in each container, plastic was able to meet that better than aluminum or glass. So if you look at these comparatively, you realize, and this is what we made Alcoa realize, that there are advantages and disadvantages of materials. Figure out what your strengths are, and figure out where your weaknesses are, so you can understand how to be more competitive. And if you've watched aluminum manufacturers and how they've changed to respond to it, it's really interesting. So if you notice on the right is an aluminum bottle. Well, I can't tell you how much work it takes to draw aluminum into a shape like that, and how much research it takes to transform aluminum into that kind of shape, which is what aluminum felt it had to do to compete, because of the perception of value for Coke, that the bottle shape was as powerful as the liquid. And then they're continuing to experiment. So this is around glass to create a more contemporary feel by putting up a film around it, which creates a whole new kind of postmodern, kind of a wonderful aesthetic for that. And then they worked with Dean Kamen to develop this new system. Because of the amount of different flavors that Coke owns, they decided to create distribution with these kinds in different restaurants, that you can get any kind of soda from one machine by just having an interactive system. Dean Kamen did this using his work in medicine in hospitals, for making medicine in the hospitals for patients. Took the same technology, applied it to Coca-Cola, And in exchange, he got to put his water filtration system and satellite dish everywhere Coca-Cola was. So he didn't make any money doing this. He actually traded it for a social good. And so it's really interesting in this case, Coca-Cola never talks about that, Dean Kamen does. But here you see Coca-Cola reaching out to get a value, but creating a social exchange, not just an economic exchange in simple terms. So this is an interesting example of something that Coke is doing now in Vietnam. And do you want to? So I want to reintroduce Cece, who, by the way, is the co-producer of this. I've been lucky enough to work with her for 4 years on and off, both in Wuxi and here. And this is a video that is about a new kind of proposal that Coke has. You have sound? Need a little more sound. What's so interesting about this to me is the continual search for what it takes to create a vision of Coca-Cola as culturally connected. And in this case, how plastic, with these new kind of tops that are available, transforms Coca-Cola bottles from being trash to being reusable resources. And in an emerging economy like Vietnam, this is a wonderful thing because they can't afford all of those products as readily as other cultures, so it actually gives them a leg up in terms of the amount of different kinds of products they can have. And to me, probably the lighting was the most fun one for kids, and I'm interested to see how that works. But here again, this is the idea of how do you optimize plastic. And what most people don't realize is that we think of plastic as recyclable, and in the eyes of many consumers, they see plastic more recyclable than aluminum. And in the United States, aluminum was recycled for 2 decades amazingly well, with a very clear cost return to bringing cans back. And that went away, and so did the recycling effort to the same degree. But the real sense is that aluminum can be reused 1,000 times, and the plastic bottles only have 3 lives, but most consumers don't have any idea that's the case. So how do you get information out? So this is somehow the segment of the book by H.E. Laughlin about his period as the CEO at P&G, where he led the most effective design-integrated approach to meeting consumer value that I've seen as a CEO outside of Apple, and was able to meet the bottom line of the investors, was able to create new innovative products that people loved, and integrated design more effectively than any major manufacturer that there was. And one of the case studies that he mentioned in this book, The Game Changer, is this particular example for herbal essences. And so herbal essence was a product, if you look at the upper left there, the 2 bottles, the small ones, it was a shampoo that had been around for the 70s, started as a kind of health shampoo, kind of environmental and friendly, and had that kind of concept, but by the time 2000 rolled around, it had lost tremendous market share. They had to make a decision, do we actually keep it, or do we reinvigorate it? So they went to Clay Street, an innovative kind of experimental concept space that they had created, and they created a new concept, and this is it. So you see the old bottle, and you see the kind of identity it had, and what they went for is to create an identity that would be appealing to young women 15 to 25. And so this is the series they came up with, which actually used a combination of graphic identity on these brightly colored packages. Now the amount of research it took to do this was enormous because they used 3 plastics, which is normally not done in a package. They had a 2-year cycle time from innovation perception to actual delivery, and they also integrated a graphic overlay that went perfectly with the form of the bottle, and they also had to have the chemists create colors that would work with the color of the plastic so that they could get the individual colors that they were looking for each sub-brand. So this is an amazingly complex, integrative approach by a company that's as big as any company in the world, and the result was they went from bottom of the line to the #1 shampoo in the United States and then eventually into a global system. So these are some of the identities that they developed, and LPK in Cincinnati was the graphic identity, and Ziba Design in Portland created the product form. So, so the important thing here is that using a combination of graphic communication identity to create value propositions through that level, then matching that with package performance of material and color, created an excitement in that whole market that forced every competitor to respond. And so you can see these different examples. Now this is a wonderful example for design in the United States, and Megan is here representing herself, her company in IDSA. Kodak, George Eastman developed a company in Tennessee that actually made this film originally for photographs and then eventually for film itself, that was made out of material, or wood-based material, cellulosic. And so it was existing for years, and then it separated from Kodak as Kodak divested, and it started to develop its own research group. When designers started to work with them, they only had 2 products they were making out of cellulosic, and within a few years we expanded their capability into entire new markets that was enormous, and we were able to, with design imagination, take the performance value of cellulosic plastic and place it into a new value proposition in a whole host of products. So when Nalgene products failed in the United States because they were seen as leaching, the Lexan was seen originally as not, but then it became leaching. You have the development of these new cellulosic bottles that, because of the wood nature of the plastic, they do not leach petrochemicals back into the water. So most of the bottles in the United States are now using this plastic. They did an early concept one, which was incredibly successful, and it launched a whole new category for them. This is an example of University of Cincinnati contributing to the number of student projects they now hold. So we transformed their research and development from pure chemistry and technology into increasingly using design as an innovation for itself to help with the chemists to give them new markets to design for. So this is a new, I don't know why these are interesting distortions. Anyway, there's a book that came out 2017 by the World Forum, and the author, Klaus Schwab, is the head and founder of the organization. And what you see here are cropped images of a new website they've developed from that. And so this website is amazing. Let's see what we got here. If you tap any of the 125 themes that are on the website, this comes up. And what I think is really interesting is this is kind of taking the value opportunity analysis that we produced around 2000 into 2004 into a whole new level. So when you look at advanced materials and you press one of those white nodes around it, you start to see all the connections. And so I would say for anybody in manufacturing in any business today, this is a beautiful reference system that back up everything that you can look for in associative value and connection in the world that we live in today. And so it's an amazing new resource. And here's another one for on discovery and design. And it just shows the associative value. Then you can go in even further in each one of these. So it has levels of depth. So this is an example of a book that started as a simple overview, and I would advise you to get the book as well. And the first thing that was so exciting about the book itself was it talked about the pros and cons of technology. And as we know, if you're honest about what you're doing, there's always a downside, a potential challenge, no matter what you're making or producing. And how do you become honest with that so you understand how to deal with it directly rather than trying to pretend it doesn't exist? So I think this is a wonderful new resource that everybody needs to use. Again, you can keep on. And so the fact that they did this in a little over a year is pretty amazing. And there's actually an app you can get if you join. I haven't been able to figure out how to do that yet. So, and just look at the amount of information that's right there for you. And the interesting thing about this resource is we all own spots of this. We all have our little bit of knowledge that all of us carry with us because of one perspective or another, but this is a meta perspective that allows you to roam around themes. It's 125 themes, countries, and or materials and research. So here's something that's going on in Cincinnati. Ohio, for the longest time, was one of the major manufacturing centers in the world. And when Detroit made cars, all the pieces were produced in the state of Ohio. Cincinnati, one of the largest manufacturers in Ohio itself. So we're now on a board that's starting a whole new initiative to create a new invigoration of not only how to manufacture more effectively and take advantage of the advanced manufacturing in the city and the state, but also to empower people in lower economic levels to be able to be educated enough to create jobs in the new sector, because one of the biggest problems is we're leaving more and more people in the economy behind because of the lack of education. As they lose one kind of economic position in one kind of company, they're not retrained effectively. So this is going to be not only a leveraging center to leverage technology, it's also going to be an empowering center to educate and empower people to be able to partake in the new kind of economy. And so this is the building. We just got permission to get land right here at the University of Cincinnati in their new research corridor. And now we're going to be building this building within the next few years as a major resource. And it's taking about 5 different sources around the United States and integrating them into one holistic innovation center that works across different issues of what it takes to revive an economy. So again, it's people, manufacturers, and entrepreneurs. And so we have tremendous entrepreneurial spirit in Cincinnati. A lot of the graduates of the university are starting new companies. How do we empower the people who don't have that education, who still have ideas? And how do we lead with key manufacturers like we have GE Jet Engine in our area, as well as a number of other capabilities. And then this also links with the university as well. So I'm one of the people on the board. And the other thing I work with is the Livewell Collaborative. And in that case, I'm working with Children's Hospital and Boeing. And so what's interesting is the Livewell Collaborative is the only external resource that Boeing uses to actually connect their planes to people. So we do a lot of projects to understand how to transform the interior of their planes to make it better for flight attendants and for passengers. And so on the right, you see a project that we just did by bringing AI into the plane for both flight attendants and passengers to increase the experience of being in a plane. That won an international award. And again, we're using technology, we're using materials, but we're looking at transforming it from value. This is an interesting piece of the project that was just done. As we continue to be able to assist more and more people with challenges, we're starting to see new opportunities like this. And what's amazing for me to live in a lifetime where you can actually take someone who is either a below-knee amputee or even higher and give them a system that allows them to actually run faster than someone with a leg is a major, major success. And so these are examples of how we're moving further from helping people with disability to actually enabling everybody, whether it's hearing or using this kind of production so that you can make several different size hands as children grow up inexpensively with 3D printing and all the advances there. And so, as I said before, all these companies that you see here are both, they're all services, and they're all some combination of digital systems and analog. And how do you know how to balance those effectively, and how do you understand that economy? So this is still going on at an incredible rate. It's just getting faster. And in 2007, according to one of the people that works at Google, that Friedman interviewed, we are now at a point where technology is moving faster than people, so the challenge is how do we reconnect that gap so we actually have more and more people connected to technology and falling behind. So design plus material is one of the ways we can do that. So that's, I think, the challenge for all of us, and that's why we're here today. And that's it. Zero.